The young and the restless spoilers shock. The news spread through Nice like wildfire. Claire Grace was pregnant. What should have been a private revelation, something whispered carefully between lovers and family, instead became the kind of headline that electrified drawing rooms, boardrooms, and whispered conversations alike. For those who had watched Claire rebuild her life after betrayal and scandal, the news was cause for cautious celebration. The prospect of her becoming a mother, of forging a future not marred by her past, seemed to prove she had finally chosen stability over chaos. And because the child was Carl Abbott's, at least by all appearances, the announcement carried even greater weight. It meant that to powerful names Newman and Abbott would be bound together again, not by business or grudging alliances, but by new life. For many, this was a fairy tale ending, a confirmation that Claire had chosen wisely. But for Holden Novak, it was nothing short of annihilation. For months, Holden had occupied the shadows of Claire's life, the man whose devotion had never wavered even as she gravitated toward Carl's influence, wealth, and stability. To outsiders, Holden was the close friend, the one whose loyalty was touching but ultimately futile. But those who saw beneath the surface recognized the intensity in Holden's gaze, the way his presence lingered at Claire's side even when words went unspoken. Their bond was undeniable, and for a time, Holden convinced himself it was unbreakable. He believed she would choose him, not because of power or money, but because of the authenticity of their connection. Yet Claire, ever pragmatic, made her decision with cold clarity. Her life with Carl offered the security Holden could never match. And in her mind, Holden was not so much abandoned as carefully ushered toward the exit, kept close just long enough that he would leave quietly rather than erupt violently. But Holden was never going to accept quiet dismissal. He read Claire's calculated kindness for what it was, an attempt to keep him pacified while she built her future with another man. Still, even in his fury, he clung to hope until the pregnancy shattered it. With the world now convinced that Claire carried Carl Abbott's child, Holden's hope imploded into rage. To him, it was not merely betrayal but humiliation of the highest order. The woman he loved had chosen another, conceived a child with him, and now presented that choice to the world as a victory. Holden felt gutted, as though the very ground beneath him had collapsed. His reaction was as volatile as it was predictable. Holden's fury was volcanic, erupting in words that scorched every remaining trace of tenderness he might once have offered Claire. He hurled insults, spat accusations, his voice laced with bitterness and venom. He called her heartless, deceitful, a manipulator who had strung him along only to discard him when a better offer came along. The anger that consumed him was not just about Claire's choice but about what it revealed about himself, that he was, in her eyes, unworthy, insufficient, the man who could be loved in secret but never claimed in the light of day. And yet, beneath the torrent of curses and recriminations, darker impulses began to stir. A man scorned is dangerous, but a man who believes he has been robbed of both love and legacy is capable of anything. Holden's thoughts turned not just to heartbreak but to vengeance. If Claire was truly carrying Carl's child, then Holden's place in her life was obliterated forever. There would be no second chance, no possibility of reconciliation. He had been replaced, not just as her lover but as the potential father of her children. For Holden, who had imagined building a future with her, the betrayal was unbearable. What frightened those closest to him was not the anger itself. Anger can burn out, given time, but the way Holden's rage sharpened into obsession. He began replaying every moment with Claire, dissecting every word and gesture, convincing himself that she had never truly loved Kyle, that she had been coerced, manipulated, or blinded by ambition. In his mind, there had to be a way back, a way to reclaim what was his. That delusion, paired with his bitterness, created a dangerous cocktail. It was no longer enough to accuse Claire of betrayal. Holden wanted her to feel the same pain he did, to experience the devastation of being stripped of everything she valued. The threat of violence hung unspoken in the air. Would Holden lash out physically, crossing the line from verbal cruelty to physical harm? Or would his revenge be subtler, aimed at destroying Claire's reputation, undermining Kyle, or even casting doubt on the very child she carried? Those who knew him feared that the man who once professed undying love could not simply walk away, not when humiliation gnawed at him so savagely. And Claire herself, though outwardly determined, could not help but glance over her shoulder, sensing the danger that lingered just beyond the reach of her new life. Claire's pregnancy should have been a source of joy, a chance to anchor herself in stability and future promise. Instead, it became a fault line, exposing the fragility of the choices she had made. By choosing Kyle, she gained wealth, security, and the approval of Genoa City's most powerful families. But by discarding Holden, she created an enemy with nothing left to lose. And in the soap opera world, a man with nothing to lose is more dangerous than any boardroom rival or family feud. The tragedy of Holden's unraveling lies in its inevitability. He was always too invested, too consumed by his vision of a life with Claire, to accept any other outcome. Her attempt to let him down gently only delayed the explosion. It did not prevent it. Now, with a child on the way and marriage plans solidifying, Claire stands at the center of a storm she cannot control. Kyle, oblivious to the depth of Holden's fury, believes he has secured his future, but in truth, he has only inherited a rival who will stop at nothing to reclaim what he believes was stolen from him. In Nice, where whispers travel fast and alliances shift like sand, the revelation of Claire's pregnancy is not just personal news but a catalyst. Families will align, enemies will take advantage, and Holden's fury may yet ignite a scandal that engulfs them all. Whether he turns his rage into physical violence, psychological warfare, or a campaign of secrets revealed, one truth is clear: Holden will not go quietly. And Claire, radiant with the promise of new life, must now live with the shadow of a man she once trusted, a man whose love has curdled into something dark and dangerous. Kyle Abbott remained blissfully unaware of the storm raging just outside the fragile walls of his happiness. For him, the news of Claire's pregnancy was nothing short of miraculous, a promise of stability and a future he could finally cling to after years of failed relationships, betrayals, and fractured loyalties. To Kyle, Claire represented redemption, the chance to prove that he could build a family not just out of obligation but out of genuine love and choice. He basked in the warmth of anticipation, oblivious to the daggers of jealousy and rage being sharpened in Holden Novak's mind. But in Genoa City or Nice, for that matter, ignorance is rarely bliss for long, and sooner or later, Kyle would be forced to confront the fallout of secrets and lies he could not yet see. Holden's fury had reached its zenith the moment he learned of Claire's pregnancy. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound he had endured before, not only because he lost the woman he loved but because the child she carried sealed his defeat. It was one thing to lose Claire to Kyle in matters of affection, it was another to know she had chosen to create a life with him, to anchor herself to him in a way Holden could never erase. His rage, volcanic and consuming, spilled over in words that scorched Claire with accusations and insults, reducing their once intimate bond to ash. Yet in the quieter hours, when fury ebbed into exhaustion, Holden was left with the unbearable truth that no amount of anger could change Claire's decision. She had chosen Kyle, and no storm of curses or bitterness would undo that. And this was where Holden faced the most difficult choice of his life. He could stay in Nice, simmering in the shadow of Kyle and Claire's happiness, poisoning himself with resentment until it inevitably erupted into something reckless and destructive. Or he could leave, extracting himself from a situation that would only destroy him further. Deep down, Holden knew the truth: if he stayed, disaster was inevitable. His presence alone was a provocation, a reminder to Claire of what she had walked away from, and a threat to Kyle's fragile sense of security. Already the cracks of paranoia could be seen, even if Kyle pretended not to notice. Holden's proximity gnawed at him like an itch he could not scratch. If Holden lingered, the stage would be set for confrontation, scandal, perhaps even violence. But leaving would require Holden to accept something he had never been able to swallow: a defeat. For a man who had built his identity around his love for Claire, who had convinced himself that their bond was stronger than ambition or circumstance, the idea of walking away was tantamount to erasing himself. Still, there was logic beneath the madness. If he truly loved Claire, perhaps the greatest act of love was to release her, to let her live the life she had chosen without interference. To remain would only deepen her contempt, confirming her view of him as obsessive and dangerous rather than loyal and loving. By leaving, Holden could salvage the dignity he had left, even if it meant carrying his heartbreak into exile. Claire, for her part, had reached a clarity that surprised even herself. Once, she had entertained the illusion of keeping Holden close, believing she could manage his devotion without letting it consume her. But pregnancy changes everything, and with a child now at stake, Claire's tolerance evaporated. She was no longer simply choosing a partner, she was choosing the father of her child, the man who would stand beside her as they raised the next generation of a complicated, powerful family. For that, Carl was the obvious choice: steady, connected, wealthy, and most importantly, willing to believe in her future without dredging up the sins of her past. Holden, for all his passion, represented instability, obsession, and danger. Claire could not afford to allow him space in her life any longer. She made her decision, and she intended to enforce it. Carl, meanwhile, continued to float on a fragile cloud of happiness, blinded by hope and love. He saw Claire's glow not only as maternal but as a sign of their deep connection, proof that despite everything, she had chosen him and only him. What he failed to realize was that beneath her serenity lay layers of secrecy, half-truths, and emotional landmines. The very foundation of their relationship rested on concealment of Holden's feelings, of Claire's divided loyalties, and of decisions made out of calculation rather than pure devotion. Sooner or later, those secrets would find their way into the light. Genoa City, and even Nice, was never a place where truth stayed buried for long. And this was the cruel irony. Carl's salvation depended not on his love for Claire but on his ability to see through the illusions she spun. If he remained naive, if he continued to believe in a flawless narrative of love and pregnancy, then the eventual revelation of secrets would devastate him, robbing him of trust and stability in one crushing blow. But if he became vigilant now, if he learned to question the silences, to observe the tensions between Claire and Holden, he might brace himself for the storm and survive it. Carl needed to open his eyes, to recognize that happiness built on lies cannot last. As for Holden, every instinct told him to fight, to claw back what he believed was his. But somewhere within the storm of his emotions, a quieter voice urged him toward restraint. Perhaps the wisest course was to leave Nice before his grief curdled fully into destruction. Remaining would mean watching Claire and Carl build a life together, every smile, every touch a dagger to his heart. And Holden knew himself well enough to realize that he could not endure that without breaking. If he stayed, he would lash out, and if he lashed out, he risked not only destroying Claire but destroying himself. His only chance at survival lay in departure, painful though it might be. The streets of Nice, once a backdrop for romance, now pulsed with tension. Every corner seemed to whisper Holden's name, every shadow held the possibility of confrontation. Claire's pregnancy announcement had been intended as a new beginning, but instead it became the trigger for a reckoning. Everyone involved understood, whether they admitted it or not, that the situation was unsustainable. Holden could not remain without calamity, Carl could not remain blind forever, and Claire could not continue to navigate between love and ambition without consequence. Sooner or later, the truth would force its way to the surface, and when it did, the carefully constructed illusions of happiness would shatter. For now, Holden stood at the crossroads of his life. To leave would be agony, but to stay would be worse. Claire had chosen, and Carl had won. The question that remained was whether Holden could summon the strength to walk away or whether his anger would trap him in Nice until the inevitable disaster unfolded. One truth was certain: if Holden lingered, the story would not end with words alone. Something darker, more dangerous, was waiting, and no one in Nice would escape unscathed.